Hi everyone, we are in chapter 6, and this particular chapter will deal with loops. So we will talk about four next loops, which is just regular for loops if any of you have had experience with loops before. And we'll also deal with do while. So what I'm going to do is briefly go through the guided program at the end of chapter 6 that you will have to complete for your lab to make sure you have an understanding as to what you are creating and what your program will actually do with this particular GUI. Okay. I also recommend watching the chapter 6 videos via the link inside of Canvas, and also use the supplemental resources that I provided that have YouTube videos that go in depth with your loops so that you will make sure that you have a good understanding. So in this particular chapter, we will introduce the menu strip object. So this is one new object that you will create. And this particular object gives you a menu. A lot of times you have seen this inside of Word or any Microsoft Suite, or also here in Visual Studios where you have File, Edit. You can click on either or any of these and it'll give you a list of items that you can select. So now you will create your very own file menu strip that will have two options, either to clear all your contents or exit. Now, in your chapter 6 videos inside of Canvas, it will have a longer list, but I do not require you to have all those items. You only need clear and exit, okay? And also a second object that we will have is the list box. So this will be a particular box that will hold a list of items, okay? So these are the two new objects that you'll be creating. I have already written the code for this particular program so that I can execute it and you can see what it will look like. So this is the GUI live. And notice if you click file, you can click clear or exit. And then the enter button here, your enter weight loss button, is functional. So if you click this particular button, an input box will pop up. So this is another object that you will work on creating, is an input box, which is allowing the user to enter information. So now it's asking for the weight for the first person. So this particular program is going to retrieve 8 different persons' weight and insert it into or add it to the list box. So then you'll have a list of weights inside of this particular box here. So let's go ahead and enter some values, which is say 125, 145. I'm entering random values, but you'll notice as I enter a value, it is being added to the list box. If I enter, say, a character, letter L and OK, it's going to give me an error. It's going to let me know that it's an error, and it's going to repeat and ask me for the information again, which I will walk through that in the code area where the loop is looping back around to retrieve the appropriate value. OK. Also, if I do a negative number, it will give me an error and let me know I need to have a positive number. So that is working on a loop as well. So what you want to think about a loop is just an repeating iteration. It's repeating, okay? So you're going to have to set certain conditions to determine whether or not it repeats or whether the loop terminates, okay? And we're going to enter 145, and we entered 8 different weights. Notice that because there wasn't enough room for all 8 to be visible, you now have a scroll here, a scroll bar that will basically scroll through and let you see all the different weights. And based on all the weights that were entered, they were all added up. And this is now printing the average of all weights. So this is what the program will do, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and click File and Clear. Notice that it clears everything out. And then I'm gonna click Exit, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do is go into the code section. So double click on your form, okay? You'll notice here all the code is already in this particular window. I'm gonna walk through all of it. But for the most part, you can retrieve this from your textbook as you're following the steps, excuse me, at the end of your chapter 6 program with the guided program development portion. We know that our option strict on must be, it must be on so that it doesn't automatically convert our types to their default, okay? All right, so the first set of code, well, before I go through the weight loss, let's just scroll down here. You'll notice here in your menu script button, so procedure, here you have where you're clearing out the items in your list box. Notice we have a list box, LST is the acronym used in front. We're clearing it out. We're also setting the visibility for your label to false, which means it clears it out. You don't see the label at the bottom. And also it will enable your button. So everything happens when you click your weight loss button that enter your weight loss, okay? So when you click this clear, this is what happens. And inside of your menu script also, when you click your exit, it closes the program, okay? So let's go back up to the button where you have your events taking place. So this, remember this program or all your programs are event driven. Okay, so we all know that these are all variables here. We have created a variable of type string, decimal, and the rest are decimals. So here, this string is gonna hold the weight loss. It just depends on how you want to use it. And we'll see here where we have different strings where we're going to want to replace. It just depends on what we want to say in our input box, our input message box. If you recall, it had different data. It was requesting information from the user, telling them to enter their weight, but it also gave us an error message if they entered an invalid character, and also if you entered a negative number. So notice that we have all these different strings stored and declared with a different name. So we have a negative error message. We have a non-numeric error message. We have a normal message that will appear each time. And then we have our input message that we want to appear. And then we have a heading. So remember any message boxes that you have or any boxes that pop up, you always want to have some type of heading, something at the very top. And so this one is going to say weight loss. Okay. So notice here, we've initialized this particular variable here to 0.0. This is going to be your cumulative sum variable, which means it's going to retrieve each of those weights that you entered. If you know, remember, I entered several different weights and it was adding them up. A cumulative sum variable basically adds up all the values that you tell it to on its own. Like it's just set up in the computer, in the system that way, and understands that it's a cumulative sum variable that is going to keep track of every value that is sent to it. So it's just going to continue to update this particular variable to hold whatever values are being continuously added up, okay? Which you'll see that where we're entering it, okay? So you also have here, whenever you're using a loop, you're always gonna have certain conditions that have to be met. In some cases, you may want to have a counter variable that's going to control it. So we're basically gonna use here number of entries where we're starting out with entry 1, entry 2. If you recall on the message box, it was showing us, and just to make sure you're with me, I'm gonna execute it so you can see. So enter, and it says here, enter number 1, and then I enter, and then enter number 2. So you'll notice that it's increasing each time and asking for the person's information. So I'm just gonna close that and go back, okay? So we're gonna start the count at 1, and our max is going to be 8. We only want 8 different persons. So this is going to be the value that stops our loop. Once we hit 8, that's gonna be it, okay? And then now we have this string weight loss here, where if you recall up here at the top, we declared our value here, and we haven't stored anything. So that means this input box here is going to take whatever the user entered and store it here. You guys should be used to this by now because we've been retrieving data from the text box and storing it into a string variable. But this time we're retrieving from the input box and we're storing it as a string variable. So no matter what the user enters, it will be as a string. And of course, we'll have to convert it. Okay, so now this is your input box popping up, asking for the data. We enter our first number, and once we enter our first number, we're storing it as a string. But remembering, we can't multiply, we can't do anything with that value because it's a string. So now we'll have to do other steps to make sure that the person is making sure that the value is valid, and we'll have to convert it and all of that. So this particular program is using a do until, all right? So what you want to do here, this particular program, when you're dealing with do until, it's going to do this until this becomes true. I know it sounds a little, I know it sounds a little weird, and it may be a little different as opposed to what you're normally used to and all of that. But your do until works slightly different from your do while. Your do while will be do while true. But your do until, do this until this particular statement becomes true, and then it stops. I know it's a little backwards, but just bear with me. All right. So now what we're going to do is look at here what our conditions are. So you notice that we're using the or, the logical or operator. So either of these conditions can be true. All right. So here, int number of entries, which is 1, right? And then here is greater than int max number of tries, which is 8. So we know that is false, right? Or here, now we have string weight loss equals string cancel click. So what this means is when this message box pops up, if the user decides not to enter a value and they click the cancel button instead, then that's what will be stored. It's going to let it know, oh, they click cancel. All right. But if they entered a value, and as we see this here, the int number of tries is not greater than 8. So none of this here is true. So now we're going to step inside of our loop. Okay. I know it sounds crazy, but that's just how it's set up. And then once it steps inside of the loop, now we're using an if structure. You guys should remember that from our last chapter, dealing with conditional execution and all of that, decision structures. So this one here is now going to check to see if the value that the user entered is numeric. So remember when we were checking and I entered a number, I entered a letter. And if I enter a letter, it's going to return false here, all right? Which means it's not numeric, right? And so because it's not numeric, it's going to skip all this and it's going to move into this else here. And that's where you saw the error message where it was telling me that I had to enter a number, all right? So now, because it has given me that message, now what it's going to do, this particular program is now going to loop back around. So that's the great thing about loops. Your program does not continue past this point, past your loop, until this particular portion terminates it. It's not going to continue past it until your rest of your code until this particular loop has terminated. So now, although you entered a non-numeric value, it's just going to go back around and it's going to repeat the process over again. That's why it allowed me to enter another value. And so now I enter another value and it checks it again. And if you recall, I entered a negative number, right? So now if I entered a negative number, now it's going to skip all this again. And now, well, what's this going to do? Let me back up. So if it's numeric, it enter a negative number, that means it is numeric, right? Yes. now it comes here and it takes the value and convert it, okay? So we're converting it to a decimal. So remember that we were dealing with weight, so we can use that as a decimal. So it converts that value to a decimal. But if I entered a negative number and it checks to see if the value is greater than 0, a negative number is not greater than 0. So it will skip this portion, and now it's gonna give me that negative error message, letting me know that I have to enter a positive number, okay? And now my loop repeats. It's still not done. It's not going to stop until this portion terminates it. So it repeats again, asks me for a value. I enter that value. It checks to see if it's numeric. It's appropriate. So now I'm going to convert it to a decimal. So the first, let's just say the first value I entered was 125. It converts it to a decimal. Because I entered 125, it'll just make it 125.0. It'll just add a 0 to the end, okay? Now it's gonna check to see if weight loss is greater than 0. If it is in fact greater than 0, this is true. Now we will finally get these statements executed, right? And so now I have found that this value is appropriate. And now I want to add that value to my list box. So notice your statement here. It's your list box, dot items, dot add, and then you pass whatever it is that you want to pass. So remember, decimal weight loss hold the value that the user entered in the input box. And so that's what we're passing. After we convert it, we're passing it, and now it adds it to the list box, okay? And remember, I told you there's a cumulative sum variable that we have that's going to add them all up. So now we're updating. So now we're taking whatever's in decimal total loss, which is 0. Remember, it was 0.0. And now we're adding the first weight that was entered. All right. So now plus equal to here is a compound assignment operator. It's just a shorter version of what you see here. This is equivalent. All right. This is basically what this statement here in comments is basically what this statement is, okay? This is just a shorter version of it, all right? So now you see decimal total loss, which was 0, and we're adding whatever was entered, which is 125. So whatever that is, now it's 125, and it's added to and stored to decimal total loss. So now decimal total loss has been updated to 125.0. It is no longer just 0.0. because we've added a number there now. And then now what we have to do is we have to increment number of tries. So if you recall, it had enter member number 1, enter member number 2. So now we're ready to enter member number 2. So this right here is basically equivalent to, let's just look at it just to make sure you are with me. So int number of tries equals int number of entries plus 1. All right. So each time this particular one will be updated with 1. It's going to add 1 each time. So now int number of tries here, if you recall, let's go back up. Int number of tries started out at 1. Right? So now we're updating it. So remember, this is your counter variable that's going to be helping control your loop. So now we're updating it, adding 1. So now this is being updated to 2. All right. And now the input message box is now going to appear, and it's going to ask for the second person's weight. And so now what we're going to do is it's moving. Once it's done with this, it comes here to check to see if int number of tries is less than or equal to max number. Yes, it's 2. The value is 2. So it's less than or equal to 8. So it's less than 8, right? So now it presents us with our new message box, right? Our new message box, and it comes back around, loops back around, and repeats again. So int number of tries is 2. Is it greater than 8? No, still false. If we click cancel, no. So neither of these is true. So it continues and repeats the process over again. Checks to see if it's numeric. If it's a good value. Say we entered 100 and we entered 100. We're converting it to a decimal, which will make it 100.0. We check to see if it's greater than 0. This is true. And now we're adding that particular item to our list. So now we have 2 items in our list box. And now we're updating weight loss. So remember, total loss, because of the last value that was entered, it became 125, right? So now we're taking 125 and we're adding the next value that was entered, which was 100, right? So now now the value, or the new updated value, is 225. So now 225 is stored into decimal total loss. And now we're incrementing number of entries. Remember that it was updated to 2 on the last iteration. So now it becomes 3 because we're adding 1 each time. Each iteration, every time the loop loops around, it adds 1. So this is our second iteration. So now we're going to add another 1, and now we're at 3. All right. And now we're updating our normal. If you notice here, your normal message is just you telling the person here, enter your weight loss. Okay, just to make sure you're seeing that. Okay. Now, after we enter that, it moves here, checks it again. All right. And now that we check it again, now it's going to present our message again. I'm not going to go through all 8, but I think you probably get the picture. But what I want to point out here, your input message is enter. Let's scroll up just to make sure you can see it. So your input message, enter weight loss for team member pound, right? That's your string. And then you're concatenating here the int number of tries. So remember, int number of tries started out at 1, it goes to 2, 3. So that's how that is appearing on the input box every time it changes. It says enter the weight person, and then you use concatenation here, and you use whatever the value is of int number of tries, okay? That's how that is updating. And then once it gets to 8, okay, and notice that 8 will increase to 9. And when it gets to that particular iteration, after it gets the 8th person and it loops it back around, 9 is now greater than your int number of entries, right? It's greater than 8. So now this is true. So it terminates this loop. So now that that has become true, it terminates the loop. So now it comes after the loop to finish off the rest of your statements, all right? So now what it does is check to see if int number of tries is greater than 1. Yes, it's greater than 1 because we entered 8 different persons' weight. If this is true, then now we're ready to make our label visible, right? And we're ready to calculate the average, all right? So decimal total loss, remember, decimal total loss hold the total of all the weights entered, and then we want to divide by however many entries that we had. Int number of entries, remember that our last value for int number of entries was 9, which means that it terminated our loop. So -1 makes it 8 because we only retrieve 8 persons, all right? So 8 divided by the decimal total cost, all right? Or decimal total cost divided by 8, sorry. And then whatever the result is will be stored inside a decimal average, right? DEC average. And now we want our label to appear, okay? So now when our label appears, we'll have here average weight loss for your team is concatenation, and then that value. Notice we're using F1, which is just basically you're fixing the number so that it'll just print a number with 1 decimal place, okay? Now, if int number of tries is not greater than 1, then it'll just say no weight loss value entered, all right? So now that message box is gonna pop up, okay? And then once this is done, once the label appears, you'll notice that your weight loss button is now disabled, all right? Because we're setting it to false, okay? Hopefully that was And like hopefully you understood what was happening. I know this do until is so weird, but for the most part, when you look through the videos, which I'm gonna go to, I'm gonna go here. So you'll notice I have additional resources here. So you have the do while, the do until, and the for next. I recommend looking through those to learn more about your loops, just to make sure you're comfortable. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I just wanted to make sure you all were understanding what you are creating for this particular guided portion. Okay. All right. See you guys soon.